Welcome to the Marketecture podcast. I'm Ari Paparo. I'm joined today by Eric Franchi from AperiumVentures and our guest, Paul Bannister, the Chief Strategy Officer for CafeMedia. Paul, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Ari. Great to be here.
I've followed you on Twitter for years and love how you think about stuff. So this is exciting for me.
Most of my interactions with Paul is when I say something outrageous on Twitter and he just very calmly corrects the record for what actually happened. And I appreciate the fact checking.
I have to try to keep doing that.
Let's start with, for those who aren't aware, with CafeMedia, which is kind of an interesting company, sort of a hybrid between a publisher, an ad network, and a tech provider. Do you want to kind of explain to the audience what CafeMedia is?
Sure, yeah. So to state the obvious, like today's world of digital advertising is really complicated and getting more complicated, generally speaking. And so for more and more publishers, it used to be that you could like set up an ad server and set up some ad networks and like make some money. And that's like harder and harder to be true these days. So what we do is we act as kind of an exclusive ad representative for publishers, mainly kind of like SMBs, independent content creators, small businesses, where it's really like not in their best interest to run the ad server, run the exchange partnerships, run the ad networks, deal with all the, the madness of ad stuff these days. We kind of take all that kind of burden out of their hair. So we run the ad server. We have a direct sales team that goes and sells the creators and publishers that we work with. We deal with all the ad tech stuff. And so it's been a good thing. And we these days are, more and more getting into the world of helping publishers and creators with kind of other parts of their businesses. We have like an SEO team that helps publishers with their SEO. We have a email marketing team that functions like an agency for some of our publishers to help them like build, get their email strategy, working well and gathering emails and sending emails out to their readers. We have a PR team that does PR for publishers, things like that. So really like working more and more to enable these creators to like get their content out in more places, build their audience and do more and more with their business.
And so the reason I wanted to have you on the show was that I feel like you really have your finger on the pulse of the publisher ecosystem. You're involved in a lot of the standard setting. You're involved in the sandbox activities. So we kind of want to think of the show as like what it's like to be a publisher nowadays in 2023. So I'll just kind of hand you that question. What is it like to be a digital publisher in 2023?
I actually had breakfast this morning with somebody senior at a very large publisher, not one of our customers. And we were talking about how like the beginning of every year is just like this like chaos of like, oh my God, 46 things have just happened. I got to figure out what to do. You spend the first half of the year, first 3 quarters of the year, like trying to get everything working. And then the last quarter of the year, you're just kind of like sort of on autopilot in Q4 because it's where the most money comes in and whatever else. This year is no different. There's a lot going on. Talking about AI stuff, talking about, what's going on with ad exchanges these days. What is the future integrating with DSPs instead of SSPs, where, what's going on with Google and the DOJ and whatever. There's so many things to stay on top of and feel like you're ahead of. Otherwise, you fall behind quickly. So there's a lot going on and you have to keep up with it to keep moving forward.
Yeah, never a boring day. And I think that's what keeps companies like Marketecture in business, because we constantly have to keep on top of the stuff. And what about like the day running the business, trying to stay in the black on, declining revenues from digital and competing with Google, et cetera. What's it like to be in charge of monetization at a digital publisher?
For us and for our publishers, what I think was an important decision a number of years ago where we said, we're just going to do programmatic. We're going to become expert at it. We're going to become best in the world and really optimize our stack, work with advertisers via private marketplaces and preferred deals and things like that, and really optimize for that and set up our business around that. And I think that has proven to be very successful. Now, we're sort of like adding to that and saying like we think getting into direct sales is a place to go, a place where we can grow and do more. And we're hiring up a big direct sales team right now to really kind of go after that opportunity more. But I do think that for us, it's worked well to really try to focus on like one thing at a time, not take on too many, crazy problems simultaneously, like perfect something and then move on to the next. So we've had the benefit of that strategy kind of working well so far.
2 questions. So is the direct sales effort a result of the programmatic market just moving towards PMPs and less open exchange?
I think a little bit that. I think it's a number of factors. I think partly it's the end of cookies coming, I think, is making buyers thinking about like, how do I get access to the audiences that I want, the data I need for targeting, get better information for measurement, and working directly is a component of that. It's trends like that that's kind of leading us down this path and thinking that this is a pretty big opportunity right now.
Yeah. And then question two, like where are the areas of opportunity for a typical publisher, whether it's, a cafe publisher or not? Like, are they, getting super interested in content and commerce? Are they trying to do more with video? Like, where's the real areas of opportunity?
I would say the two biggest things for us. So one big area of focus is commerce. So some of our publishers already do pretty well with commerce, affiliate, things like that. But we're kind of building out teams internally to kind of help more with that and do more things in that space. We think that more and more value in like trusted content, being out in the world, helping consumers make decisions about what to buy, and then obviously building a revenue model off of that. So we think that's kind of a big area. I think the other thing is really focusing on audience engagement, above and beyond just like audience growth. I think for a while, it's great to get more and more visitors showing up to your site. That's really good. But how do you engage them more? How do you get them to come back? How do you know more about them? And that's where things obviously like email marketing, like just brand building in general and making it so people really know who you are and want to come back and see what you have to say. So those are big areas of focus for us. And I think those are sort of evergreen things where it's like they're built on trust. And I think that's where publishers do best, is where they really lean into trust and really, building that trust with their audiences.
You mentioned commerce media. Is there a tie-in with retail media? Are the big retailers talking directly to publishers, or is it more arm's length through a DSP?
I think it's beginning to happen. I think for a while it was just through the DSP and somewhat arm's length, but now I think as more retail media networks are figuring out that they don't have all the supply that they need, they can't get access to the scale audiences that they need just purely through buying through a DSP, and figuring out that working directly with publishers is the way to go. It's very early days, but I think that trend is beginning to happen now.
One of the subjects I definitely wanted to tee up for you is the sandbox. I made a joke on Twitter, which was a little true, which was, one of the reasons I sold Beeswax was just not to have to deal with the sandbox. But it obviously has a big effect on publishers. Flock's dead. Topics is on, shaky ground. There's Fledge. There's a bunch of other stuff. What's the state of play right now, in your opinion?
It's been going on, 3+ years since Google said, cookies are going away. And then we've still got, roughly 18 months or so before it happens, assuming there's no more delays. I think who the heck knows, but it does feel like for the first time, truly Google and, the Chrome team in particular is like really, really engaged, really deploying resources against this, really rolling out new features, really working with people who are leaned in and trying to, make things work. Like they seem much more committed at this point than ever before, which is good to see. Although somewhat scary because as they're committed, it makes it more and more likely that there's no more delays and this is it. And so I hope that if that is true, that companies that have sort of taken a wait and see approach are like, okay, I got to get involved in this and got to start figuring things out, knowing now that like maybe the clock really is ticking to the end right now. We've all got to get out of it.
Right. But I guess like if the clock is ticking to the end, are any of the sandbox proposals at a point where they would have a business impact on, would they be ready for prime time and would they actually have any business impact?
We think Fledge is pretty exciting and really, it can't replace all the scenarios that kind of existing ad tech built on third-party cookies can do, but it can replace a pretty good number of them, and it creates a couple of interesting new opportunities as well. So that's the one that we're spending the most time on, because we think that's the place where there's the most opportunity and the most to really build something new and better in the future.
Give us Fledge for Dummies in like 15 seconds. What's Fledge?
Fledge is built to replace the idea of retargeting. So instead of dropping retargeting pixels on your site as an advertiser and then using your DSP to retarget them elsewhere, you drop Fledge tags on your site. And instead of the information being stored like in your DSP or DMP or something, the information is stored in the browser. And that way you can do a lot of the same things as you can with retargeting today, but you never get to see the information. So it's stored in the browser. So it's like separate from ad tech. So it's much more privacy friendly, but let you do kind of like key use cases that are retargeting, but things around you retargeting that are interesting too.
What a great explanation. Thank you. I understand it now.
So one of the main purposes of this podcast is just to give deal flow to Eric. So what interesting areas are there of startups that publishers that get you excited and that investors might be interested in at an early stage?
I said AI before. I think AI is a really interesting space. I think there's a ton of potential risks and landmines. I think there's a lot of potential opportunities. I'll use us as an example. We actually bought a company 18 months ago called Topic. It's built on GPT-3. And what it basically is it's almost like content inspiration. It like analyzes your content. It analyzes how your content ranks on search. It figures out who you're competing with, and then it recommends new areas for you as an author to like create new content where you can compete and win more. So it's like using AI to really like almost like solve writer's block. Like, how do you get new ideas of what to do and where you can win? And so it's like, I think there are lots and lots of things like that. And that's obviously content specific, but I think AI has, and large language models, generative AI, like that space has a lot of really cool use cases that are being figured out right now. That it's really early days that like, I'm certainly watching closely and trying to figure out what else is out there.
Do you think there's a risk to quality publishers that AI is going to make it too easy to produce low quality content and you'll just have content farms and made for advertising take over the web?
I'm optimistic that the problems that Google solved 10 years ago with the original content farms will apply now and will make it very hard for those sites to get traffic. Maybe they'll get traffic through paid and effectively turn into just pure MFA sites and things like that. I'm a little less worried about that outcome. I'm optimistic that like systems exist today to kind of watch for that. I think people will try, but I'm optimistic they will fail.
Just given the discussion around Google, are you guys familiar with Core Web Vitals?
Yep.
Yeah. So my sense is there's probably, some sort of addition to Core Web Vitals that will, detect for either, sort of like generated or, low quality content that then will, again, to the extent that Google remains relevant as where people get a lot of information upon search, will rank, some of this, AI driven stuff accordingly. But it's interesting. And I think it's a real risk.
Yeah, for sure.
Eric, give us Core Web Vitals for Dummies in 15 seconds.
It's Google's attempt. It's web.dev/vitals. It's Google's attempt to make sure that the most relevant, highest user experience and quality content, obviously then websites and publishers, get ranked higher in search.
Got it. So one of the changes that I've thought about a lot is as cookies go away, that it seems to benefit publishers because in the old world, the advertisers had the leg up. If they knew who a user was, they could just pick them off on the cheapest site available. And in the new world, there has to be more cooperation with publishers to get context data, their user data. First question would be like, is that a good way to look at it? And second question is like, how are publishers thinking about identity and participating in UID2 and other things like that?
I think, it's such a weird thing to forecast how it's going to happen. I think what you said is certainly right. There are a lot of reasons to believe that the end of cookies could be good for publishers. I think there's also a lot of reasons to believe it could be bad for publishers. Like buyers are like, do I think that the top 500 advertisers will figure out ways to get around this and make it work, a fair amount of which will be, direct sales and things like that if they need to, and working with big publishers. And that's obviously beneficial to publishers. I think that's true. I do wonder if for smaller advertisers and the DSPs they work with are going to struggle to, when they lose the ability to target exactly who they want, are they just going to say like, forget this stuff on the web? I'm just going to buy my ads on search and Facebook.
Right.
That's the end of it. And like, there are pros and cons and it's hard to know which is exactly right. I'm generally more optimistic, but it's like, it's so hard to forecast.
It's sort of what happened with ATT is that like it made certain user acquisition strategies no longer ROAS positive, and that made certain advertisers effectively exit the market.
And so it's like, yeah, how do you, if that's going to happen again, focusing more attention at the top of the tail with the biggest advertisers makes sense, because those are the ones that they're going to figure it out because they've got the tools, they've got the need, but all the small ones are could dry up.
Right. Okay. Second half of the question. How are you and how are publishers in general thinking about participating in any of these next generation identity solutions like UID2, the LiveRamp initiatives, ID5, et cetera?
I mean, for us, we're partnering with all of them. We're trying them all out. We think it's still pretty early days. We think today there is like little that's being given up. I think in the longer run, it is a question of whether those sort of ID systems are the right way to go, or things that are more like clean rooms where you've got it's a real direct advertiser to publisher relationship. It's a true one-to-one. Those feel like they're more privacy friendly, data protection friendly, and that probably is a good thing. But, UID2 and RampID are great examples of tools that, those companies are not standing still and they're building more and more controls into what they're doing. So it's like, for us, we're like trying it out, seeing what works, watching things. We can always pull back later if we need to, and we haven't given up very much. I think we're probably leaned in more than most publishers because we are so programmatic heavy. It's more necessary. I think other big publishers are still mostly in a wait and see kind of mode before they really commit to anything like that.
Is it fair to say that if you have scale, if you're a large publisher, you're more likely to want to keep your data for yourself and go the clean room route? And if you're smaller or more dependent on programmatic or open exchange, you're more likely to try to go one of these ID routes? Or is that not the right way to think about it?
I think so far that's been a true statement. I think, again, maybe there are solutions that'll work better for both. And also for the small publishers, you do have the case of companies like ours that are effectively aggregating across a lot of them. So it builds scale, which makes it much more relevant to advertisers. So there are ways for small publishers to participate. Small advertisers, I think clean rooms are going to be a challenge for because of kind of what you're saying. Match rates are going to be low. Your list is small. And you may need something like an ID solution to get that scale.
The Trade Desk going direct to publishers through their what's it called? Open something? I always forget the name of it.
OpenPath.
OpenPath. Thank you. So I'd be interested in your thoughts about it. Is that here to stay? Is that a big factor, or are they just picking off the biggest publishers they spend money on anyway? So
we were the first publisher running it with the Trade Desk. We've been running it since just over a year, actually. It was last February. So we have the most experience with it at this point. As a publisher, when you're looking at kind of ad tech partners, you're looking at incrementality. How much more money am I making because I have this partner, not just how much, flows through the pipes necessarily. For us, the Trade Desk OpenPath connection has, started moderately incremental, and over the course of the last year has become pretty solidly incremental, it's been moved in a positive direction. It's not a huge share of total Trade Desk spend. We still get Trade Desk spend coming through a lot of other SSPs, and that has been pretty consistent over time. So it hasn't radically changed the distribution of where Trade Desk spend their money with us, but they've been a good partner. I don't know what Trade Desk plans are. I think that it does feel like they're leaning more and more into it. They're getting more publishers on board now. It seems like they're getting big ones. They're getting kind of more mid-sized ones also. I think they're trying to get more scale and volume there. I think it's probably a lot of good reasons for them to want to do it. So I think it's here to stay. The other interesting semi-connected to that is in the Yahoo announcement 2 weeks ago or whatever that they're shutting down the SSP is the fact that they seem to be continuing to lean into their DSP direct connections. We and a few others have a direct connection to the Yahoo DSP. And we weren't sure that was going to stand the test of time, but it seems like based on this new news from Yahoo that they're leaning in there too. So, are we back in a world where more and more DSPs are going to go and connect directly again? I'm not sure. Yeah, that is interesting. I didn't know that about the Yahoo relationship. Very interesting. When you say incrementality, you make more money on the Trade Desk OpenPath than you would for a different path. Is that primarily because of lower fees, because there's less middlemen, or is there something else driving higher incrementality? I think part of it is less fees. Part of it could be, it's to us, OpenPath just it looks like any other SSP. It's a DSP, but it looks like an SSP to us. It's just another pre-bid adapter where, whoever it is spends money. The reasons why any particular partner can be incremental are fees. It is things like match rate, which obviously Trade Desk is going to get a slightly better match rate for a variety of reasons when they have code on page directly. That has an impact. It could be things just like speed to respond can increase the bid rate. So there's a bunch of different reasons why a given path to a publisher can be beneficial and drive incrementality. And in terms of other DSPs that do this, it's really Yahoo that you mentioned. I know MediaMath has had this sometimes in the past. And Xandr doesn't really have this because they charge a fee on the sell side, right? So Xandr kind of operates like an SSP and a DSP separately. Or am I misunderstanding that? No, you're right for sure on that front. You've got Criteo. It's sort of weird what they are, but they connect directly also. whether it's direct to a publisher or like through like an owned SSP. It's a fair number of the big DSPs now have pretty direct paths to publishers.
So just given you work with so many publishers, my sense is, Cafe is just like, so focused on optimizing and driving revenue. Is there a like tech stack for publishers that, you say, all right, you need to have all of these bases covered? And I'm not just talking about like the programmatic stuff. You talked about like getting your email correct, making sure like you've got your site engagement right. Is there like, a tech stack, a list of best practices, like, because a lot of publishers and publisher teams listen to this, that, you think that should be just the baseline for everyone right now. And, what might we not be thinking about if we're ironing that out?
There definitely is not one answer, because it is somewhat dependent on like what is the type of site that you are, the type of audience that you attract, the type of content or tools that are on your product.
I want to make money, Paul. I'm a CRO. I got a number over my head. Sort of news site to put it out there, right? There's no like deep specialization. What's the technology stack that I should have to help me make money and drive revenue and keep my job?
So I think it's funny. Like we've actually sort of, as we've been talking, mentioned some of like the key components. Like you want to have a high performance site. So like Core Vitals, which is like a lot of that is about measuring how fast your property responds to users, things like that. I think that's really important. That helps you rank well for search. So I think having really good tools to optimize for search, like there are tools like SEMrush and Ahrefs that can help you get lots of like competitive intelligence on like the search terms you're doing well on, things like that. What do you do there? Search as a publisher, traffic from search engines tends to perform better for advertising than like social traffic or other kinds of traffic, because users coming from search are like, they're looking for something. They're in kind of like an intentful mindset. And so they tend to do better from an advertising perspective. So like that kind of traffic is valuable. That said, traffic from your own email list, traffic that's like owned traffic, like direct or via email or something else, like that can do really well also. So it's like kind of owning more of your own traffic is really important. So performance, optimizing for search, optimizing for like owning your own traffic. We do a fair amount of work also with like user engagement. Like how do you recirculate users in your sites? Like we don't work with, and we don't work with directly any of like the Tabulas or Aperients or whatever else, but we have our own tools that we give to publishers to let them recirculate traffic in their own sites. Like how do you help users spend more time and find more things? So like the technology almost is a little bit less important than like the business goals that you're trying to solve. And that is performance, building a good audience, getting repeat traffic, getting people spending more time, things like that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So much of what you've talked about there, and then touched on a couple of times, is about repeat engagement, audience, good UX, which is I think exceedingly obvious, but it's not top of mind for all the things that you read, right?
A lot of publishers do this, like where it's like you're chasing the new bright and shiny thing, you're chasing the new trend. Let's pump out a whole bunch of content based on AI. Let's pivot to video. Like whatever is the new trend. And like, sometimes you should follow the trend, but sometimes like the tried and true, like obvious things, like they take time, but they really bear fruit and create a lot of value over time.
All right. Well, that was awesome coverage of the state of publishers in 2023. Let's transition and do a bit of a news roundup. So, Eric, do you want to tee up Rembrandt, Omar Tawakal's new startup?
So speaking of AI, there's the chat GPT stuff, right? So the text-based, prompt-based creation tools. And then for a while now, there's been all of these image and content creation tools, Stable Diffusion and so on and so forth. So a couple of weeks ago, there was an announcement of a new company, full disclosure, we invested, called Rembrandt. This is interesting from a couple of perspectives. So, number one, I think there's just a ton of innovation in AI and generative AI right now. And I think increasingly it's going to be making its way into the advertising and marketing space, for the reasons why there's sort of like, things sometimes start with advertising and marketing. Like there's, big data sets. There's the ability to, sort of like move fast with a willing customer base. So it's, the first, I think, like real generative AI company that, has hit the radar in 23. Number two is the founding team is super interesting. So Omar Tawakal, for those who are not familiar, was the founder and CEO of BlueKai, which was, the first third-party data marketplace, third-party data exchange, sold that to Oracle for a boatload of money. He then left and with some of his core team, actually started a voice AI company that was acquired relatively early in its life by Cisco. And it's powering a lot of, I think, some of the innovation of WebEx. There's still plenty of people that use WebEx. So you've got like this team that has built solutions for data-driven marketing in Act 1. Then got really deep into AI in Act 2, and then now they're back in advertising and martech. And this isn't a rule, but increasingly seeing a lot of former successful founders in the sort of programmatic and data 1.0 era coming back right now. There's a list of them. Brian O'Kelly.
Eric, this is an amazing elevator pitch, but I still don't know what Rembrandt does. What does Rembrandt do?
Edit as much as you want out. Yeah, I realize I'm being too rave review on team. It's programmatic product placement using generative AI. Right. So like so much of the content that's out there, mostly by creators, it's like manual to do product placement. You need to get a hold of the product, negotiate with the brand, do, the actual placement, get approvals. They're number one, using generative AI to find and then place, product placements in videos, whether new or existing. And number two, sort of building a marketplace around it. So super cool company. Good to see, real talent coming back into this space and hopping on the AI train.
Yeah, it's exciting. So basically you're watching a video, maybe it's like an old episode of Friends, and in the marketplace, a brand has purchased the right to show their product, and they're automatically inserting an image of this brand on the table in the kitchen, in the apartment in Friends, or something along those lines, right?
Yeah, that's a potential downstream use case. There, again, Rembrandt.com, you can sort of see this stuff in detail. They're very focused on like creators right now, because that's just like a fast growing, fertile space, so to speak. But the applications for content libraries across, everything you can imagine is there once the proof of concept has happened.
So I'm dancing on TikTok, and suddenly there's a Tropicana orange juice bottle in front of my face, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a cool thing. Well, I think actually Triple Lift had a product similar to this a couple of years ago, and I don't know if it got much scale. But part of the issue may have been like that you need AI to like generate these things at scale, otherwise it's almost impossible to get scale around. So it's kind of an interesting new business idea.
Old ideas, new again. This was actually the first idea that Innovate had too. Innovate is a publicly traded video analytics company, and their first demo that they got featured in like TechCrunch was almost exactly this. It was like a Heinz bottle on a kitchen countertop in a piece of content. So it's definitely an idea maybe whose time has come. Well, good luck, Omar, and good luck to you, Eric, also on your investment. Next piece of news this week was changes at YouTube. So Susan Wojcicki is moving on after a pretty successful run as CEO of YouTube. And my friend and former boss, Neil Mohan, is the new head of YouTube. There was some actual back and forth as to whether he actually got the CEO title of YouTube or not. I'm not sure at this state if it's been confirmed one way or another, but he's the head of YouTube at this point after running its product group for quite some time. So I'm a big fan of Neil. He's an operator. He gets things done. He's great with product people. He's great with salespeople. So I think it's a pretty big positive. Interested in hearing, maybe Paul tell us, what's the sense on how YouTube's been doing and, what the challenges moving forward are. Eric, feel free to jump in also.
I mean, one thing is certainly true. Like, Neil a million times more than I do, but he has big shoes to fill. Like Susan did an unbelievable job building YouTube into the giant that it is today. So I think that's a tough act to follow, but he's a smart guy and I think has a lot of great opportunities. YouTube's last couple of quarters have been soft, as we all know. And how much of that is just like COVID correction and like things will get back on track in the next 6 to 9 months? Or how much of it is like a little bit like things are changing and they really needed a new big idea? I'm not sure, but it'll be interesting to see what he does.
I've never heard in all of the time I've worked in this space anyone say anything but glowingly positive things about Neil. It's so rare, and I don't have a experience working with the guy like you did, Ari, but just like so universally loved and respected in the ad tech space. So I think that's That's really interesting. And legend has it that he had an offer on the table from Twitter way back in the day when Twitter was, growing like crazy and, sort of clearly had a path to go public. Again, this is legend, rumor, nothing substantiated, but he was paid like $100 million to stay at Google. Have you guys heard this one?
Yeah, it's more than legend. It was actually written up in the Business Insider. They wrote an article. I just love the title of it to this day. It said, "This Google exec gets paid more than Carmelo Anthony." And that was just such a classic. My remembrance of it is that it wasn't Twitter. It was either Box or Dropbox. But I think the story is basically.
That's so it just goes to show how much respect and weight he has within the organization, and he was the architect of the Google's programmatic stack through acquisition of Invite and AdMeld, right, Ari?
Yeah, he absolutely played the primary role in selling DoubleClick. He played the primary role in integrating DoubleClick into Google, and then executing the kind of 10-year march that Google's been on to dominate all aspects of advertising. He's going to have a lot of time in Washington, D.C. in his new job.
Yeah, I mean, so if you believe that YouTube is the future of streaming, right, and the future of streaming is on the big screen and not the little screen, I mean, this is I think a new and bigger market and bigger challenge for the guy, and anybody that's bet against him in his career today has failed. So I think it's awesome.
I do think that Paul had a point about the softness. The last couple of quarters, YouTube growth has definitely been soft. It's actually been down, I think, in the last quarter. And I don't know why personally, but it feels as though they may need to shake things up a little bit in the way they monetize their partner. They're from the other perspective, from the perspective of their partners on the CTV world, there's always sort of complaints about that video on YouTube doesn't monetize as well as it should, as well as it does on the owned and operated sites. There's complaints about the tech stack. You're not allowed to use your own ad servers. You have to use YouTube or GAM. And of course, there's the incredibly monopolistic practice of not allowing Trade Desk and other DSPs to buy YouTube inventory, which, it would be quite a miracle if that changed.
Yeah. So, interesting that most of the challenges you pointed to are around monetization. So again, if you would, think about who you'd want in times of challenge to figure out monetization, it's probably him. Do you guys watch YouTube on the big screen?
A little bit.
I'm a subscriber to YouTube TV and I love it. I use it instead of cable.
Yeah, I'm not a subscriber. I just watch it and I sit through the ads, and it's great. Like, I prefer it to looking at it on my phone. So I think the opportunity ahead is immense.
It's also, you said this, sorry, but it's very surprising to me how low YouTube CPMs are compared to air quoting true CTV here. It's just as good of an experience, and I think the CPMs have a lot of headroom.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a big opportunity that's being missed somewhere, and I'm not sure exactly where, but it's there. All right. So we would love to run this podcast. We record it once a week, and we would love to have a week go by where we don't talk about Twitter and Elon Musk. But unfortunately, we live in the modern world. It's 2023, and every week we have to talk about Elon Musk because he keeps making us. So it came out this week that, first of all, this is not about him boosting his own tweets. That story was a week ago. This week, the story is that he wants Twitter ads to work the way Google keywords do. And he expressed his frustration on Twitter. He actually just promised everyone they would, that obviously we're fixing this. We're going to make the ads work the way they should, like on Google. And then he gave his engineering team a full week to build Google AdWords effectively. And then he was pretty broadly pilloried by people who know what they're talking about, including my friend Bruce Falk, who used to run Twitter ads, who says, and I quote, "As the former lead of ads at Twitter, I can confidently say this man has no idea WTF he's talking about," referring to Elon's tweet. Is this even worth us talking about? Eric, should we just shut up and move on?
I mean, how much is there to unpack here? I mean, I think the challenge to build Google AdWords in a week to an organization that's been you've downsized several times via layoffs is a pretty big ask. What do you think?
Yeah, it seems like a big ask. I mean, after all, it's just text. I mean, how hard could it be?
I mean, again, we didn't even talk about this last week, but I thought you actually raised a really important point that's central to this whole, like, what should the ad experience, what should the ad business of Twitter look like, which was around the Super Bowl. So if you recall, during the Super Bowl, if you were scrolling around on various other social media apps like TikTok and what have you, you sort of like kind of checked off the list of what you did. There were sponsorships, there was on the field stuff, there were all these unique things, and then on Twitter, people were arguing about politics. So it's just
absolutely.
The most important media event of the year, you're not just like all in and making that your biggest day, right? Your biggest. Your Super Bowl, I would probably start there because people were talking about the Super Bowl, but nobody was really doing anything in terms of the sort of like the content and ads biz.
Yeah, you open up Twitter on the day of the Super Bowl, and the feed might have some tweets about the Super Bowl, might not. In order to get a good ad experience, you have to go to the search or discover tab, select sports or select the Super Bowl, and then watch a video which plays really thumbnail size by default, audio off by default. A tiny audio off, and then they put a pre-roll from whatever advertiser before it. Really not a great experience. And then you open up TikTok and immediately starts playing the Black Keys pregame show with volume on, sounding great with a big Super Bowl banner, like join TikTok for Super Bowl content. And the next 4 things you scroll by are all sort of semi-sponsored, monetizable videos. It's just like black or white.
I think that. Go ahead, Ari. Finish the point.
The problem's not the keywords, I guess, is my point.
Yeah. It's just if Twitter is about what's happening in the moment, designing an ad experience around that, I think is a good first step. But I mean, Paul, just given how Twitter in many ways it's a big publisher, right?
Yeah.
As someone who advises publishers. And you start thinking about, what if you actually looked at this bottoms up and programmatic and data and so on and so forth? Do you have any take on this? Like, what would you do? How would you advise Elon?
That's a big question, right? I do think what both of you are saying is right. Like, you gotta know what you're best at. Like, Twitter's never going to be about the keywords or competing with Google for that world, but like, it's great at certain things. And how do you lean into those things more? Like, I think Ari's example of what TikTok is great for TikTok, but even that may not be right for Twitter. It's like, what's right for Twitter? Figuring that out and leaning hard into that is what they have to do. And it feels like it's a mishmash of random ideas at this point and not like a clear, coherent, long-term strategy. And I think that's the key. Also,
keywords is just such a 10, 15-year-old concept. I would think, Paul, if your publishers don't think about keywords as kind of the way to organize their content, they think about behavior and, frequency of behavior and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not the way the world is going at all.
I mean, I read Twitter pretty every 10 seconds through my waking day. And I'll say half of the tweets I literally don't understand. I read them and I don't have enough context to understand them. And it's like someone saying that what the New York Times said last week was not as incorrect as the other person who criticized that person. And I just wonder, if I, a human being who's pretty on top of this stuff, cannot literally understand the context of these tweets, how well is an algorithm going to be able to tease out the keywords to show an ad? All right.
Yeah, there's a lot. my only ask is, Elon, please don't brick my Tesla.
Yeah, don't brick Eric's Tesla. Elon, if you need help with your ad group, you can call me, so I'd be happy to say, no, thank you. I don't work for lunatics. And we'll go from there. All right, let's call this episode. Paul from CafeMedia, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Eric, until next week. Sorry to interrupt.
Until next week.
Until next week. We'll wait for Elon to do something else crazy.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.